Hi everybody, my name is John Bullock and I'm the author of Mark Small, This Is Your Life, a novel that's just been published by the wonderful Sheila and the Gig Press and Hayley Haugen, editor. And I wanted to just introduce it a little bit and read a section from it to give you a bit of a taste of the novel as a whole. So, Mark Small, This Is Your Life is unsurprisingly about Mark Small himself, who is a 14, almost 15-year-old boy growing up in England in a seaside bed and breakfast. And he's an only child, and living in a bed and breakfast, he has lots of people coming and going in his life, and that sort of leads to him developing a curiosity about other people's lives, and also being 14 or 15, he's in search of his own identity in many ways. And so the book looks at his own personal identity, it looks at his family, it looks at his community, and it looks at history as well in a broader sense. So the section that I'd like to read is about his relationship with his dad, Stanley, and who is a greengrocer and somewhat overbearing. And in this section, Mark goes up to the fruit and veg market in London with his dad, which is something he has no real choice over, because his dad has hopes that Mark will take over the business when he's a little bit older, which turns out to be something that Mark is not interested in doing. But anyway, so I'll just read a little part of this chapter. When Dad knocked on my door on those early mornings, I buried my head in the covers, hoping he'd tire of waiting and leave for the lock-up without me. But at most there'd be a pause for him to smooth out his eyebrows or bang his ear. He was plagued by an inner tickle, before he was back with a different knock, hard and slow as a bear's. I sat up in the darkness, slid my legs out of the bed, and groped for my clothes. To make sure I was awake, he stood on the other side of the door until I opened it. In my sleepy days, I'd sometimes forget my socks or put my t-shirt on inside out. He'd notice. Nothing got past him. If you had a zit brewing, he knew it. The princess would be ticking over in the drive. While I fiddled about getting my shoes on, he sat in the car and prepared himself, as if a silent drive through deserted streets required the protection of some mystical guide. In our 10-minute drive to the lock-up, we said nothing. Instead, Dad acted like he was retaking his driver's test. Mirror, signal, manoeuvre, feed the wheel. Maybe his mystical guide was filming him. Whatever was going on, I felt like I should be ticking off boxes on a clipboard, judging his every move. Once we got to the lock-up, he parked in the exact same spot every time, about a foot back from the bollard, so that our heads were perfectly aligned with the hanging basket. As much as I moaned to myself about how predictable he was, and how he wouldn't try anything new, it felt good to have your own space. He didn't need to put a sign up. Everyone knew he parked there. I never once saw another car in his place. Our old Bedford lorry had thick canvas curtains and drop sides for easy loading, rust holes over the wheel trims. The cab smelt of old pipe smoke and whatever we'd stacked in there the night before, usually something pricey and crushable, like strawberries. It had a tray of cutlery in the gearbox and a million miles on the clock. On the way to market, I kept myself from falling out of the big vinyl seat by wedging my feet against the dash, and then drifted off to the dry whir of the engine that seemed to hate those morning drives as much as I did. Still, it never let us down. A24, M23. Through Purley, Streatham and Brixton, the cab flickered with streetlight as we clunked and rattled past roundabouts and shopping parades, past phone boxes rammed with shopping carts, past pavements littered with half-eaten burgers and chip bags. You couldn't drive 50 yards without seeing a dole office, a tower block, an overpass. Life was either concrete or water, never both. Borough Market hit you like a dawn dip in winter. Noise, light, damp from the arches, hustle and bustle, an assault on all senses. Men bawled at each other as though they'd only just been given voices. But the noise wasn't the worst part. As soon as Dad parked up and found a barrow, I'd have to slip into my harness and be Mark the mule for an hour while he fanned around with his pad and pencil, scouting for bargains. No matter how nice the people seemed, Dad said it was all fake. Never mistake friendliness for friendship. They'd soon have the shirt off your back. He'd been going up there for 20 years and he still thought like that. Even though most of the traders hadn't set foot in the kitchen, fruit and veg was still man's work, like barbecues. There might have been 10 women tops in the whole market. Most worked the snack vans or sold styrofoam teas from flimsy tables that wobbled from the weight of the urns. I was the only kid. In other walks of life, that might have entitled me to special treatment. But not there. You were only there for one reason, to work. There were no shortcuts. They even had their own pub on the corner, which stayed open all night long before pubs were allowed by law. I don't know if Dad ever went in there to see his mates. He didn't when I was there. Market wasn't for making friends. Come to think of it, nowhere was. He didn't have any. Name a situation, he had a saying for it. God knows where he got them, or what half of them meant. For example, enemies aren't cheap. Surely he had it arse about face. What he must have meant was that friends were expensive, what with them being so rare, and that once you found one, you treasured them for life. As far as enemies went, it wasn't hard to hate people you didn't even know. People always do stupid things to set you off. Jump the queue at the post office, smack into you in the street, tell you to get off your bike in the park. So whichever way you looked at it, enemies were cheap and easier to make than a sandwich. Plus they were no use to anyone, therefore cheap to come by, at least in terms of demand and supply, which had been Dad's big thing ever since he tried to convince Uncle Rex all those years ago that he wanted a life in the trade. Dad often did his buying at one stall and then moved on to another, leaving me to load up whatever he'd just signed for. It was a relief when he'd gone. Not having him constantly in my ear meant I could please myself. And that's when I got the chance to see some of the traders' true colours. They were no different, just the usual backstabbers you'd find anywhere. And they were so at home with themselves they didn't care who heard them. Apparently Frankie Bell's business was on the skids because he was too soft to get rid of the lad he'd taken on to run it. Like Frankie, the lad came from a dodgy home, and Frankie wanted to give the kid a leg up. But while Frankie was busy, quote-unquote, diverting his energies around town, the lad paid him back for his kindness by cleaning him out. And then at another stall, 3 blokes were saying how Don from Ilford got too big for his boots since his win on the National. He'd roped in his daughter and son-in-law to run the shop while he golfed in the Algarve. They'd made a mess of it. That'd teach him a lesson about family. By the time I caught up with Dad, not only was the barrow so loaded that when I stood between the long handles with my back to the mountain of stock, I could hardly shift it, but my head was so bunged up with gossip that I felt bloated and sluggish. I'd heard more than was healthy. Everyone at the market stuck together. If you upset one of the traders, more than likely you'd upset them all. And if you did, they'd stitch you up quick as quick, till it wasn't worth your while going up there. Dad had seen it plenty of times. And like he said, people were friendly all the time they could afford to be. After that, you were on your own, which is why enemies weren't cheap. But he wasn't about to lose sleep over the ones who'd felt the pinch. Serves them right, he said. If they don't know what side their bread's buttered, I'm not about to tell them. They got the same 2 feet as the rest of us. Okay, thank you very much. You can find Mark Small, This Is Your Life on the Sheila and the Gig Press and on online retailers. Enjoy the book. Thank you.